Our cover story tonight is about China's next mission, a mission to achieve hydro-hegemony, turn water into a weapon, control how it flows and where it flows. A host of targets have been identified. The biggest one is India, a country China fears could soon surpass it as a regional powerhouse. So this is what China is doing. It is building a dam along India's border, a 60,000 megawatt super dam on the foothills of the Himalayas. Once completed, this dam would be the biggest in the region, also the biggest threat to India's sovereignty. How exactly? The answer lies in the dam's location. Look at this map now. The dam is being built along the Brahmaputra river on what the Chinese call the Yarlung-Tsangpo river. This river is significant for multiple reasons. Firstly, it is the world's highest altitude major river, which descends through the globe's longest and steepest canyon. Second, the river's gorge is twice as deep as the US Grand Canyon. It holds Asia's greatest untapped water reserves. And lastly, the river's fall creates one of the greatest concentrations of river energy, making it a magnet for Chinese dam builders. Which is why China wants to weaponize it. Use this river as a coercive tool to build pressure on its neighbors. How? Let me elaborate. This dam is being built at the strategic trijunction of China's borders with India and Nepal, right opposite the Kala Pani region of Uttarakhand, which Nepal has repeatedly called contentious. So once completed, this dam could prove to be a major geopolitical headache for India, given its location. What's worse, this dam could also be used to store or block the passage of water. This can cause water shortage, particularly in Assam and Arunachal Pradesh, if China decides to turn off the tap. And upon release, it can also create floods downstream. This would affect not just India, but also countries like Bangladesh and Nepal. Now, for a moment, consider the kind of damage this could do. A free-flowing river can go dry. This, in turn, will kill the river's ecosystems, trees, plants, fish. It can drive species towards extinction, not to mention the impact it will have on the livelihoods of the people who live along these rivers. Now, that is a lot of power in the hands of one country, and China does not hesitate in wielding it. It has done so several times in the past. Take the example of the Mekong River, one of the world's longest and most important waterways. The river flows from southwestern China into Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia and Vietnam. China has built at least 11 dams on this river. What for? To gain control. The Mekong River and its tributaries are the economic lifeline of around 60 million people in Southeast Asia. China's dams control their fate. Let's look back. What happened in 2019? The Mekong River began to dry. China blamed it on insufficient rainfall. There was a drought. The impact was severe. The result was this: Thailand's sugar output hit a 9-year low. In Vietnam, rice fields were damaged. In Laos and Cambodia, water levels hit a record low. Who caused this? Did China trigger the drought and lie to the world about low rainfall? I don't ask this question without reason. Satellite images expose how China used its dams to stop the flow of water. At the origin of the Mekong, there was an abundance of water. China was using these reservoirs to store water. Reservoirs like the Jingong Dam. For 12 months, from May 2019 to April 2020, the reservoir on this dam was full. There is another dam on the Mekong River. This is the Nuo Zadu Dam. It didn't have any water back in May 2019, but strangely, by April 2020, even its reservoir was full. Where did this water come from? The point I'm trying to make is simple. China is a repeat offender. It has made a habit of weaponizing rivers. It is able to do so because it has the support of geography. China is a starting point for rivers that flow into 18 downstream countries. No other country controls water to so many nations. So China is exploiting this advantage. It is creating an extensive dam infrastructure to arm itself. Again, there is proof to back this. A report from 2016 says that China has built as many as 87,000 dams. 87,000. Why does China need so many dams? Why else but to turn water into a weapon? The question is, how long will the world allow this? How long can we let China use water as a coercive tool? I mean, aren't there any international laws to prevent this? In 1997, the United Nations passed the Convention on Non-Navigational Uses of International Watercourses. It established two key principles to guide the conduct of nations regarding shared water. The first stipulates equitable and reasonable use of shared water bodies. The second obligation is not to cause significant harm to neighbors. However, the Convention states that it is up to countries themselves to spell out precisely what these terms mean in their own watersheds. Let's be frank, this is a loophole that many nations continue to exploit, especially China. A case in point is the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on a tributary of the Nile. It's called the Blue Nile. This dam has been under construction since 2011. Egypt, which depends on the Nile for 97% of its irrigation and drinking water, fears that Ethiopia will use the dam to weaponize the river. Ethiopia calls Egypt's concerns unreasonable, and the face-off is still underway. So you see, there is both proof and precedent to oppose China's plans. It cannot be allowed to build the world's biggest dam, and that too in secret. It cannot be allowed to weaponize yet another river to harm its neighbors. We also have a piece of advice for China. How about letting go of these hegemonist acts and for once, focus on getting your own house in order? Your GDP growth has slowed down. Your property giants like Evergrande are incurring billions in losses, $81 billion to be precise. With so many troubles brewing at home, why would you want to pick up another fight with your neighbor yet again? Now, to discuss this and a lot more, I'm being joined by geostrategic expert Brahmaputra and Professor of Strategic Studies at the Center for Policy Research. Professor, thank you so much for joining us on Gravitas.
Thank you for having me.
Right, now you've written about this controversial dam extensively. You've said that China is unmatched as the world's hydro hegemon. I'm quoting your words. You also say that China cannot just keep building the world's biggest dam in secret. Tell us about why this dam poses risks for neighbors, especially India.
There are several reasons. First, the sheer size of the dam. Then, the fact that this dam is being built in a seismically active area. This makes this super dam potentially a ticking water bomb for downstream communities in India and Bangladesh, especially in Northeast India. The southern part of the Tibetan Plateau, especially the southeastern corner of the Tibetan Plateau, is an earthquake-prone region because it sits on the geopolitical fault line between the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate. That's where the two plates collide. And therefore, this region is known to be a quake-prone region. In fact, there was a massive earthquake in 2008 that struck the Tibetan Plateau's eastern rim. It killed some 87,000 people. These 87,000 people were mostly killed in China's Sichuan province. And this earthquake drew international attention to the phenomenon of reservoir-triggered seismicity, which is actually a technical term that means severe tectonic stresses caused by a dam's reservoir. There was a new dam that China had built right next to the epicenter of this quake. So we have an example of where Chinese scientists have drawn a link between a major quake and a new dam. So given that background, this super dam clearly could be a risk for downstream communities.
Absolutely, Professor. You're calling this a ticking time bomb. Experts have also called this the riskiest project ever undertaken. We've spoken about international law and also the loopholes. What can India do about this? In fact, what can any stakeholder do?
Well, first, India unusually has been quiet on this super dam project. It hasn't raised its voice. It should be highlighting the risks of this super dam, the fact that this project is being taken with opacity. There is no transparency at all about this project, and yet India has been quiet. India can build cross linkages. India is downstream countries, therefore it doesn't have leverage on the river vis-a-vis the upstream China. But India has leverage on other issues, for example, trade. The fact that China's trade surplus with India has crossed more than $100 billion arms India with leverage, and therefore building cross linkages to leverage your diplomacy is the way forward to highlight the risks of this project, to draw international attention to this opaque project. This is the least that India can do.
Absolutely. You're calling this an opaque project. That is, of course, concerning. Professor Chilani, thank you so much for all your insights and thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.